Okay, today I'm joined by U.S. Representative Kathy Manning, a Democrat serving the 6th District, which includes Guilford and most of Forsyth County. Madam Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
You were present for an attack on our democracy last week. And I just want to know what it was like on Capitol Hill that day. Can you kind of describe your experience?
Sure. I was sitting in the gallery because of COVID restrictions. The congressional physician had asked that we not have everybody on the House floor at the same time. So the only people on the House floor were those who were going to be speaking and had a particular need to be on the House floor. They were, the speaker had decided that for people who wanted to watch from the gallery, which is sort of the balcony upstairs, there would be time slots allotted, and I really wanted to be there to watch some of these debates. So I had gotten one of the time slots and was sitting in the gallery watching the speeches and totally engrossed in what was going on. And all of a sudden, I heard somebody shouting, and I could see that there was some chaos downstairs, and I could not see the speaker from where I was sitting, but I saw them ushering out Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, and I know they also ushered out a Majority Whip Jim Clyburn. They got them out of the room, and then there was just confusion and shouting. The police instructed all of the officers all over the room to lock the doors. They announced that the Capitol had been breached. All the doors needed to be locked. Then they told us that we needed to pull out gas masks. We didn't know that there were gas masks under each of the seats, but they said, pull out your gas masks. There has been tear gas released in the rotunda, which was just down the hall from where we were. So we reached under our chairs, pulled out the gas masks. We didn't know how to open them. It wasn't clear whether we were supposed to open them and just hold on to them or put them on. Some people put them on. I chose to wait because one of the police officers shouted that we needed to be sure when we put them on to breathe normally because they didn't want us to hyperventilate. So seeing the very small hole to put over your head, I decided to wait until I was instructed to put it on. Everybody sat trying to figure out what to do. We heard pounding on the doors behind us. There was somebody pounding on the door right behind where I was sitting. Shortly after that, the police officers on the House floor shouted that everybody needed to go to the far side, that they were going to be opening up the doors and they needed everybody to move out as quickly as possible. So we saw the people on the House floor evacuated, then those doors were locked, and those of us who were in the gallery were the only ones left. There was more pounding on the doors. There was shouting back and forth from the police officers trying to figure out what was going on. At one point, they told us that we should be prepared to take cover. And we waited, and then they told us that they wanted us to move as quickly as possible to the other side of the gallery. We had to step over the debris from all of the gas mask packages, and we had to duck under handrails that are separating each of the seating areas. When we got to the other side, they told us to duck down and take cover. And in the gallery, there's stadium seating. So the only place to take cover was to get down right in front of the knee wall in front of the front area. So we got down on the floor. Then they told us to take off our member pins so that they would not be able to identify who the members were if they broke through. The police officers had their guns drawn. They were you could tell they were very carefully watching all of the doors to see if they were going to be breached. Some of my colleagues, there had actually been glass broken on the doors on the House floor, and there were shots fired. And we waited for quite a while, and then they finally told us that they were going to open the door, let us out, and that we needed to go down the 4 flights of stairs to the basement as quickly as possible. That's exactly what happened. I have to say, everybody was very orderly. People were helping other people. At no time was there panic. At no time was anybody pushing or shoving, but people were helping each other down those stairs. As I was going to the first flight of marble stairs, I saw to my right, there were people lying flat on the floor. I didn't know what it was. I saw in the paper this morning, those were people who had been Those were some of the insurrectionists who were being held by the police. They were down on the floor. So we finally got to the basement. They took us to a safe location where we waited for probably 4 hours until the Capitol was secured and we were able to go back to the House floor and continue our constitutional duty to confirm the election results.
So that must have been really harrowing. I mean, to be told to put on gas masks. I mean, did you actually ever see any of the insurrectionists, or were you up in a way that they were always out of your view for the entire time?
I think I was lucky. I could not see what was going on through the glass doors below. And while some people were pulling up photographs of what was going on or news feed on their phone, I did look at one photograph of what was going on. One of my friends sitting near me pulled it up to show me what was going on. I didn't pull up anything on my own phone because I didn't have that much power, and I wanted to save the power on my phone so I could let my family know I was safe.
Did you have an idea of the scale of the violence that was actually going on around you outside the building? Or did you just, was it just a matter, I'm going to let you explain that.
I didn't really have any idea how terrible things were, how dire the situation was. I knew that the police officers were very concerned. I knew there was a lot of chaos. Clearly, if they were releasing tear gas, there was something terrible going on. I chose not to worry about what was going on outside, and I was just trusting that we would get out of there safely.
And you took your pin off, I take it, as they said to do.
That was the one moment where my heart started racing, because that was the moment that I realized that they were after us. And I do have to say that was frightening. I did take my pin off and put it away for safekeeping.
Okay. Were you terrified for your life at that point, or were you just, or did you really do you feel like you understood the scope of what was going on?
I just had faith that we would get out of there.
And now that you know what happened, have a better sense of it from the reporting that has come out since. I mean, do you feel like, what do you think would have happened if they had gotten through? What would happen to you and your colleagues?
I've chosen not to go there. I think the Capitol Police who were with us, the police officers who were with us, did a great job keeping us safe. We had 3 members with us who had served in the military, and I was determined to watch what they were doing and follow their instructions because I figured they knew how to handle these kinds of extreme situations. Okay. I figured the best thing we could do was stay calm, pray for our safety, and hope we would get out of there, and thank goodness we did.
What was the feeling in the room during those about 4 hours that you were out of there? I mean, you're looking at colleagues who have probably, well, how many folks were in the room when you went to evacuate?
There were well over 100. Once we got to the safe room, I would say there were well over 100 people, because there were the people that had been evacuated from the House floor much earlier than we. There was a group that had gotten out of the gallery before we did, and then our group. There were a lot of people in there. I'll tell you, the one thing that made me angry is that there was a group of our Republican colleagues who would not wear their masks. And we have to remember, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and the infection rates are rising, and it's a deadly virus. And one of my colleagues took a handful of clean masks and walked over to those members and said, would you like to put your masks on and keep us all safe? And they just sort of smirked at her and refused. And subsequently, 3 of my colleagues have been diagnosed with COVID. And so I was angry that particularly in light of everything that was going on, that they were refusing to take such a simple step to keep other people safe. And I also decided that I wanted to write everything down that had happened, because I didn't want it to get confused, and I wanted to remember exactly what we had been through. And so that's what I spent some of my time doing while I was in that safe room.
Okay. Do you have plans for those writings, or have you?
I put it up on my website. I have shared it with my friends. Once I got power back to my phone, because I did run out of power, I had at least 180 texts and dozens of emails. So I shared with my friends and my constituents, people who were worried about me, my loved ones. I shared what had happened.
Okay. So that must have been, I mean, you know, political rancor is nothing new. There's sides that are always after each other, but that must have been particularly awkward in that room with people with so much opposing views, basically being forced to share that space while a violent insurrection is going on outside, somewhere else in the building. Yes?
It was extremely frustrating. We all have to wear clothing when we go into the House floor. Wearing a little piece of fabric over your mouth and nose is not such an onerous obligation. And it's something that keeps other people safe.
Yes. The other part of that is you're sharing a room, presumably with people who have encouraged in opposition to the vote on certifying the president-elect's vote tally, which is normally a ceremonious act. You know,
you are absolutely correct. There were people in that room who helped incite what happened. And everybody was civil. I think we all knew we just had to get through this. And there would be time to hold people accountable later. Later in the evening, tempers did rise. I saw a shouting match in the hall as we were walking back to vote between somebody who was wearing a mask and somebody who refused to wear a mask. And then there was almost a fist fight on the House floor. And it's understandable that tempers were high because we had just been through what was truly a life-threatening experience and also an attack on our democracy and our democratic process.
And what was it like walking back in? Because by then, the scene must have looked much different because the insurgents have been in and cleared out.
After we had been in the safe room for probably 4 hours or so, Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer came in to update us on what was happening. And they both spoke very movingly about how this insurrection was an attack on our very democracy. And that as soon as we could get back, it was important for us to go back to the House floor and continue this vote. It was our constitutional duty to ensure that there would be a peaceful transfer of power. The people elected us to perform our constitutional duty, and their remarks were very inspiring. So I was proud to be able to go back to the House floor after all of this was finished to cast my vote.
Okay, and about that, when you did go back and do that, most of the North Carolina representatives on the Republican side, actually, even after the insurrection, continued to vote in opposition to certification. And I wanted to ask you what that felt like to you.
It was appalling. I think that they have taken no responsibility for the fact that they have lied to people about what happened. There was not broad spread fraud in this election. This was a fair and free election. They have continued to promote lies and they've gotten people upset about what happened. They've gotten people to believe that it was their duty to try to stop the election and try to stop the appropriate transfer of power. And it was infuriating to see that they had learned nothing from what had just happened.
Okay, let's move on to impeachment because we have a limited amount of time. But can you tell me what your thoughts are on that?
I think we saw this president incite an attack on our democracy, an attack on the Capitol. He has been promoting this false narrative, this charade for months now. And on the 6th, he had called a crowd of people to come to the Capitol armed, and he stood in front of them and he incited what happened. He told them to fight and fight hard, and that's exactly what they did. And that was appalling, it was criminal, It was a betrayal of his oath of office. 5 people died, many were hospitalized, and he needs to be held accountable for that.
Let me ask you about another part of impeachment that doesn't really get the kind of traction that the insurrection does, but the Georgia call, the call to Georgia election officials, which is part of the impeachment process on this occasion.
The calls that he made to Republican election officials, asking them basically to scare up some votes for him and to steal the election for him was appalling. And those are the calls we know about. We have no idea who else he called to try to get them to put the election in his favor. That was appalling, and it's all part and parcel of what he was doing. He was lying to his supporters about the election. He was trying to get people who he thought should be sympathetic to him to change the election results. He poses a danger to our democracy. He poses a danger to the country, and he needs to be removed from office immediately.
Okay, and of course, you know, when people were making allegations about the voter fraud that has been discredited, there was talk about what they were doing by not acknowledging the Biden victory was divisive. It was basically tearing the country apart. Now we're seeing the same kind of talk from people who are saying that impeachment is the same way, you know, that it's a barrier to healing. But let me just ask you, I think most people want this country to be united, as the name of our nation implies. How do you think we get there?
First of all, impeachment would not be a barrier to healing if the Republicans would stand up and acknowledge that what this president did was criminal and was an attack on our country, an attack on all of us. There should be no reason that this president is not immediately removed from office because he presents a clear and present danger. Now, what we need to do moving forward is the work that the people have sent us to Washington to do. We need to work with Joe Biden to get a handle on this pandemic, to make sure that we get relief to people who are struggling because of this pandemic. We need to get those vaccinations out there and in people's arms much more quickly so that kids can go back to school safely, people can get back to work safely, we can get this economy going again, and then we can work on the things that we all came to Washington to do. Get affordable health care, get affordable prescription drugs, improve our education system and make higher education more affordable, get more jobs that pay a livable wage. You know, most people worry about those everyday issues that they stay up at night worrying about. Those are the things we will be focusing on once we can get past this total disaster that was caused by this president.
Okay, I want to ask you a quick policy question, and that is, this is much more of an executive branch issue than a legislative one, but because the trade war related tariffs have hit North Carolina particularly hard, I wanted to ask you about that, because I've heard from farmers, particularly tobacco farmers who are not eligible for the bailouts, saying that it's really hurt them, and I hear from furniture industry folks as well who say the tariffs are a burden on their business. And I was wondering if you have a sense of what the Biden administration is going to do vis-a-vis the tariffs.
In my district, the tariffs have been a disaster. And by the way, the president didn't have a policy. He shot from the hip. He went after things that he thought might be helpful to him. He rewarded his friends. I think it's important to have a strategy, and your policy has to follow your strategy. China has done a lot of things wrong. They have stolen our intellectual property, and they need to be, we need to put their feet to the fire on those kinds of things. But shooting from the hip is not a policy. And I am confident that Joe Biden will put together a strategy, a long-term strategy that will help our country get where we need to be, and his policies will follow that strategy.
Do you figure that's going to be relief for North Carolinians from what the things that you've seen in your district?
Oh, we definitely need more relief for North Carolinians. There's no question about it.
From the tariffs specifically.
From the tariffs, I think that, as I said, the tariffs that were imposed didn't follow any kind of a policy. And yes, we need to have, if we have tariffs put in place, they need to make sense. The tariffs that were put in place did not make sense. And the people who bore the burden of those tariffs were the American people.
Okay, those were my questions for you. Did you have anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to mention in the time we have remaining? That
The only thing I would like to say before we get cut off is I want to remind people we are still in a global pandemic. We have a coronavirus is deadly. I would like to urge people to please wear your masks, keep your distance from people, wash your hands, and when that vaccination is offered to you, please go get it so you can keep yourself, your family, and your friends safe.
I have really one last super quick question, and that I meant to ask you, it's on my list, but I forgot. And that is, you know, you got out of the violent insurgency safely. Who do you credit for keeping you and your colleagues safe?
The Capitol Police. The Capitol Police were there to help us, to get us to safety. Now, there was a catastrophic failure in the plan that was put in place, but the officers that I observed, they did everything they could to keep us safe, and we are really grateful.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Representative Manning, so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for arranging this, Haley.
No problem. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
You too.